All right, we're going to get started. It's so great to see everyone. Welcome to the second in our series of 3 startup know-how panel discussions for the fall 2021 semester, offered by IALS Venture Development in collaboration with the Technology Transfer Office. I am Lisa Korpieski, the Director of Communications and Marketing here at the Institute for Applied Life Sciences. Today's topic is putting together your first commercialization plan. Just a few housekeeping items. The seminar is being recorded, as you just heard. All replays of this seminar in the series can be found on our website. I'll put a link in the chat. Please save the Q&A till the end of the presentation. During that time, I welcome you to unmute yourself and ask your question. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker, Karen Utgoff, Director of IALS Venture Development and co-PI of I-Corps at UMass Amherst. Karen has worked with startups, small businesses, and nonprofit research organizations on marketing-related challenges and research commercialization opportunities for over 20 years. Her expertise includes market-oriented business strategy, business planning, entrepreneurial startup marketing, strategic marketing, startup funding plans, and new venture development. She has deep experience with customer discovery and business model development for startups and established businesses. In addition to her work at UMass, Karen serves as an adjunct instructor in the New England Regional Innovation Node Spark program at MIT and the NSF National I-Corps Teams program. She is a longtime volunteer for Mass Challenge and the Clean Tech Open Northeast. She earned her MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. And now I'm going to turn it over to Karen.
Thanks, Lisa. Hi, everybody. It's great to see you here today. We're going to talk about putting together your first commercialization plan. We'll go right past that. So this is a graph that you have seen before, or a schematic that you have seen before, of a concept going from basic research to investment-ready startup technologies on the market. And of course, this is a nice logical progression from basic research to translational research to a product on the market. This is great. This is the way we like to think about things, steadily adding value, step-by-step progression. But to make that happen, to get to that endpoint, it's essential to cross what we call the valley of death. For those of you who lead research laboratories at UMass Amherst or anywhere else, you know that there's a federal research funding available for basic research in university labs. You're experts at getting that funding. On the other side, on the commercialization end, there is money from industry partners, investors, there are funded startups, there are customers. The problem is the middle, the translational research and early development stage of any startup. When you're making that transition from being in a university lab to being a company, or to be working with industry, or to get a licensing deal with a large company. And this is a really problematic funding stage. I haven't said anything about commercialization plans yet, but I'm about to. There are a number of grant programs targeting the valley of death, and they're asking for a number of items that are part of a commercialization plan. So an estimate of commercial potential, evidence of market need, a differentiated product concept, potential or actual industry partners, and or a pretty complete commercialization plan. So this is a challenge. To compete for that funding, you really need to have something to say about your commercialization pathway. And the good news is that there are more funding opportunities than ever. There are, from the NSF, there are partnerships for innovation programs funding. There's SBIR funding from all sorts of federal agencies. There's the Manning IALS funding on campus. There's also funding from Mass Ventures. In fact, this is small funding right now, but they just announced their Acorn grant programs are open, and I urge you to go to their website to look at that. it's $15,000, but it's $15,000 at this stage where it's really hard to get funding. And, so it's well worth the effort. It's open to any, faculty, researchers at any Massachusetts institution of higher education. The Massachusetts Clean Energy Center is another source. They have funding right in this valley of death, and they have funding both for academic laboratories and for startup companies, depending on the vehicle. The Massachusetts Life Sciences Center also has funding, some more toward universities and some more toward the private sector. But again, there's a number of vehicles. They are often announcing new vehicles. And so it really pays to be prepared and to be thinking about these as you try to overcome this real gap in the way new technology and innovation is funded. So when you're starting to aim for some of these, I think that's a great time to start thinking about putting the first commercialization plan together. Sometimes you'll do it sooner. You get a special opportunity. You get to pitch to an early stage investor. You get to talk to someone who's got ideas or potential business co-founder. Those are great. And those are certainly other events that would catalyze your efforts at commercialization planning. But if you want to take aim at one of these, it's the best time. Partnerships for, let me say a word about partnerships for innovation in particular. This is a National Science Foundation vehicle, and it is something that comes quite to the left side of the valley of death. So it's really translational research funding with a little bit of commercialization thrown in, and they want you to have an industry partner. The other part of that is that they are facilitating additional commercialization planning by expecting everyone who is awarded a Partnership for Innovation grant is going to participate in the National Science Foundation Innovation Corps National Teams Program. I'll have a word to say about why I haven't listed my program. The local I-Corps program here is, or the national program on this list. So first of all, I want to really take a minute to talk about what's in a commercialization plan and what it does. So the first thing to say is it's going to really explain how that nice curve that we saw in the first slide it will work. It's explaining how your team will de-risk the project, demonstrate that the technology works, demonstrate that there are customers that really want to buy what you have, and then also how will the team create value? So how are you building up the product? How are you attracting customers? How are you overcoming the regulatory hurdles that are in your path? All of those things are to come. And they are really going to be addressed beyond your first plan, certainly in a full commercialization plan when you need it. But I have found that it's really important to, it can be overwhelming to say, we're going to build this whole commercialization plan if you haven't done it before. And so thinking about starting with the first plan, the essentials is really helpful. And to me, those essentials really align with what those funding agencies are asking for. So intellectual property, which is well supported on campus by the TTO, but also, do you have a product concept? And I'm going to talk a little bit about how that's different from your core technology. Do you know what the unmet needs are in the marketplace, real world needs? And then do you know how you're different from competitors or from competing technologies or solutions to those unmet needs? And finally, the other essential part of a first plan is a start on the milestones you expect to meet and the outcomes you expect to generate. And that's so important because really that's the part that puts the plan into it. You're thinking in terms of time and cost, and then you have a foundation to build on, to go beyond that, to to the full-blown commercialization plan that maybe certainly is considering not just product concepts, but product candidates. So deeper description, unmet needs in a much deeper way, possibly because you've done an I-Corp project and you've gone out and spoken to potential customers. A differentiation plan that, again, is grounded in data. You'll address the startup team that might go beyond your technology team. And then you'll start to think deeply about resources. So, and then we'll always come back to what are those time-based milestones, expected outcomes, how does the R&D align with the non-R&D efforts, and what's your funding pathway? What grant applications are you putting in when? What investor pitches are you doing? When do you expect to need money and when do you expect to get money? So all of this, as you can imagine, is very iterative. It's really a living document. And I don't want to give you the impression that it's just made up. It's really the first plan, you'll start with whatever data you have, but just like in the scientific process and the research process, you're really looking to improve, learn, gain experience, and refine and make your plan better. So I want to give you a couple of examples today of what a commercialization plan at a very high level would look like. So I've developed just two very lightweight examples. One is a hypothetical therapeutic, a molecule to increase weight loss. This comes out of a lab from the University of the intellectual property. Maybe they've got provisional patent applications. Hopefully they have non-provisional applications. So they've taken those provisional applications and they've actually converted them and they're on their way to a granted patent, or perhaps they have a granted patent. And they might be looking forward to future IP. And if so, they're going to want to put all of that in their commercialization plan because all of that adds value. It means that you actually have the right to that molecule and to make it into something more, a therapeutic. What's the unmet need? Is it people with a BMI greater of X or people with BMI greater than X who have a condition, an additional condition Y? Or is it someone who has a BMI over X and has been trying to lose weight and hasn't been succeeding? This is where you start to think about who's your potential customer, who's your potential end user. And then, of course, you start to think about if this is going to be a prescription drug, what about the doctors who would prescribe it? You'll also think about how significant is the need. Is this something that would be a nice to have, or is this something that people are really going to profoundly need because they have a problem that they can't solve any other way? This is also where you start to, as you start to understand the unmet need, you also start to understand the market size. So you can imagine as you put more and more constraints around that unmet need, it's more well-defined, you'll start to understand what's the population, what's the size of that group with the unmet need. And you can do that based on health statistics. Market sizes often, people find that information in market research reports, but they also find it in the National Institutes of Health disease burden data, patient advocacy data, trade group data, economic census data. There's lots of sources for that. So we're already thinking about where are we getting information, how are we going to do at least our secondary research. And then a product concept. You can start to think about dosage. What's the mode of delivery? Can this be a pill? Does it need to be an injection? Could it be a patch? So you're starting now to think about, because it's really hard to deliver a molecule to people. How are you going to actually deliver this to a customer in the form of a product? Also, there are some non-physical attributes to most products. Do you need FDA regulatory approval? Probably. And you're probably also going to need for something like this insurance reimbursement, and to get it into onto the list of available drugs and in pharmacies. So there's a couple of other steps that you're going to start thinking about as you think about how are we going to build a product around our technology. And then differentiators. There's a ton of ways to lose weight, and your competitors here are not just going to be other pills. It's going to be exercise, might be dieting, might be a dieting app, all sorts of things. So you're going to think about the mechanism of action with respect to other therapeutics, but you're also going to be thinking about these non-pharmaceutical solutions, and you're going to think about efficacy, safety, ease of use, and the cost, and other things as well. And so these are very generic sort of differentiators, but as you get into a real commercialization plan, you'll start to really come to grips with these. All of these, as you start to fill in these blanks, all of these generate milestones and a timeline as you start to put together what you have to do when to actually get a product on the market. And here are some very generic milestones that you would want to think about for a therapeutic: preclinical and clinical development. And that might mean everything from in vitro studies to animal studies to clinical trials to fundraising for manufacturing and for regulatory consultants and for the clinical trials. And again, the insurance reimbursement and everything you would need to do to actually bring a therapeutic to market. Here's just one more hypothetical, and I'm including this because I want to just give you compare and contrast. This is for an AI ML, as they say, an artificial intelligence, machine learning business connector. Again, hypothetical. Different approach to intellectual property, absolutely. It might or might not be patentable. It might be that you're going to protect this, this algorithm that you have with a copyright. But if not, there might be an opportunity for provisional patents. You'll have to sort all of that out with the Tech Transfer Office. Are there granted patents? Perhaps. What about future IP? Maybe that's copyrights. Maybe that's trademarks, because you'll have a unique look and feel to your user interface, which isn't even part of your technology yet. We'll get to that when we get to the product concept. What's the unmet need? Maybe you were at a trade show and you were talking to other people about how you just can't make connections at trade shows or conferences the way you could before because of the pandemic or because of everyone's so busy. Whatever it is, you're going to define that unmet need. That may or may not be the unmet need when you ultimately get to market, but you've got a hypothesis here about what it is, a working assumption that that's where you're going after. And then you're going to ask yourself, how significant a need is that? How painful is it? How painful is it to attendees of the trade conferences? And how painful is the need to the trade organizations who presumably are going to pay you for your app, you hope? Market size, again, very different from the first time. How many organizations could you sell this to? How many meetings and how many attendees are there? So you get, again, you get a very rough approximation of market size, but you start to nibble away at the answer to that. You also want to think about your product concept here. And if you've got an algorithm, again, this is very similar to the molecule. You can't just say, here's my algorithm, go use it. You have to have a user interface. Possibly you need a unique user interface for every organization. And you may also need a user interface for individuals at a meeting. And then you also want to know is this product something that people will subscribe to, that the organization will buy and then give away to attendees? If I have all these people using it, what kind of documentation do I need? Do I need tech support? Should it be online? Do I need to have people calling? How do I support all of these users? Do I need Amazon Web Services in the mix? And so you start to gradually build up both the front end and the back end, a complete product concept. You haven't necessarily built anything yet, but now you have an idea of what you want to build. And again, differentiators, you're going to take a look at how people are solving this problem now, both in terms of software and in terms of other things. So you may have realized that what is really important is ease of use, or maybe people are already trying to use these tools and they need something with better matches. That's where your machine learning comes in. But they also might want features like integrates with Outlook or integrates with Salesforce or integrates with LinkedIn. So totally different kind of product, totally different kind of market, totally different milestones. You might have no regulatory issues or virtually no regulatory issues, but you might really need a minimum viable product with beta customers so that you can get the bugs out. You might need to get a beta customer, and that might be really hard. You still need to do fundraising, and you want to protect your IP in whatever way you can. So totally different, but again, the beginnings of your first commercialization plan. So I want to mention a couple of other things that I just think are really important to share. A couple of formats and ways to think about differentiation and milestones. So differentiation is a really hard concept to get across. It sort of combines the unmet need with the product. How are you going to do something different in a way that your customers really value? So when you're looking for differentiation, you are looking at your competitors. How are they solving problems, including, usually it's companies, but it might be just a solution, might be no solution at all. So it's depending on you. So in the case of the AIML business connector, it may just be that people are depending on their friends to make introductions. You're going to have to figure that out. But you'll look at competitors. You'll also look at factors that are important to potential customers. So this is just a mock-up of another kind of example. I like this yes-no binary approach. It tends to come at the end of some deeper research where you are looking at competitors, looking at their product offerings, recording their features, really sorting through a lot of information to identify opportunities to be different. And at the end, you go back and you start to look at this binary approach. So what are your competitors claiming for efficacy? If everybody's right around 50% and you're going to be, you can support your efficacy data supports an efficacy of 80%, you are going to want to differentiate based on efficacy possibly. And you can see that the first competitor can't compete that way. The second competitor can't compete on that basis, but us, we can. So great, yes. Here's another one. You want something to be non-toxic. That's the kind of thing that maybe everyone is, if it's something you're going to put in your body, everybody's going to be non-toxic. That's a ticket to play. So you're going to need to make sure that your molecule, your weight loss molecule, is non-toxic, but that's not going to be a differentiator. That's just something you have to do. Is it shelf stable? Yes. Others may not be, or may not be. You might say, after you weigh in all the data, you might say shelf stable for 6 weeks, rather than a week. Very important. You might have something that you want to taste good. People want it to taste good, depending on the mode of delivery, in which case this might be a really important differentiator. Again, this is all when you get into a real situation, you're really going to do the research to sort this out. I also want to talk a little bit about milestones, because milestones are super important. This is one format for milestone planning and presentation. Typically, this would be an internal table because you've got costs here or financial impact here, and you would want to move this around. So you might, if you were going to present this to an investor or in an SBIR presentation, you might edit this. But ultimately, you need, for your internal thinking, you need a pretty complete list. So here's for the AI ML business connector. For software like this, you might work toward a minimum viable product, and you'll realize that it's not enough to just complete the matching algorithm. You've also got to complete the user interface, and you might need to complete some light documentation, although not the full-blown documentation that would come with the final product or the full product. So you've got some ideas when you can complete that and how much it will cost. But you also know that you want to secure a beta customer, because you want to give that MVP a workout. And so you're working toward that as well. And your goal and your plan is to secure that beta customer by the time the MVP is done, so that you can immediately start your beta test right here. You may not know how much it costs to secure the beta customer. That may be the sweat equity that you are putting into it. But there may be some other expenses as well. You just don't know. But you're going to note that there might be a cost, even if you don't know yet. You plan for the beta test. Oh, and by the way, these periods, I didn't say years, I didn't say months, I didn't say quarters, because this is really something that's very situational. You will decide based on your particular project, what chunks of time make sense. And of course, if you're working toward a very specific goal, you might break that down further and have a project plan that goes week to week. But for these milestones, often you're talking about quarters. You might in the beginning be talking about years. To me, the more important thing is that you start to write down the milestones you need to achieve. And so you're thinking about your beta test, but you're also thinking about securing funding. So you can see there's a lot going on here. You're talking about the market, customers, funding, as well as the technology. So an X means an event has occurred. A line for the beta test with a dot at the end means an ongoing effort with a finite endpoint. And so to secure an SBIR phase 1, you have to apply for it. You have to wait for the reviewers and the federal agency to consider it. And ultimately, what you're planning is based on your application date is we're going to know by the middle of period 2. And so we're going to plan on getting it. And we know that if we do, we're going to have this is a phase 1, and it's going to be an NSF phase 1, and we're going to get $250,000. At least that's what we think, because that's the average. You're also looking to secure seed funding from investors. And so you know when you're going to start that, and when you hope to close the deal there. You're also thinking about your first product and your first full product. So you've got your MVP, but you got to do more stuff to have that full product that can be used by a customer who isn't really working with you and willing to tolerate bugs and needs a full feature set and all of that. And that's going to cost more than the MVP did. So you're keeping track of all of that a little bit. You may be off in these numbers. You may be off by 100%, 200%, but now you've got at least a starting point. So you're going to complete a website with accounts where people can log in, and that you want to have done fairly soon so that you can test with your beta customers. And now here's a great milestone. You're going to secure a first real customer. So that's going to take a long time. And then and then the X marks the spot. You have no idea how much that's going to cost. And then finally, first revenue, very important. Somebody's going to pay you $5,000 for your product. Fantastic. So this is a milestone chart that, by lopping off these costs or by editing some rows, you might present to an investor or put into a grant proposal that is asking for a commercialization plan. I want to say one more thing about milestones. Not all milestones are equal. So I've marked a few of these here as red, and by that I mean they're impactful achievements that de-risk or add value. So it takes a while to figure out what's an impactful achievement. It's not always clear, but let's talk a little bit. Let me just tell you why I chose to make the mark some as red. So complete the matching algorithm. That's your secret sauce for this AI ML business connector engine. What if you can't get that to work? You don't have a business. What if it works as well as you expect? Then you do. What if it works better? Fantastic. It might be even more impactful. But without that, you don't have a product. That's different from completing the user interface and completing the light documentation, which is really important, but is something that is much more knowable that it's possible to do. Secure a beta customer. This is a huge challenge for every startup, is can you get a customer? It's very impactful. It's impactful to investors. It's impactful to you because it's tremendous validation that you're on the right track. Same with a beta test. You're demonstrating that your technology can not only work in the laboratory, it can work with a customer using it. Fantastic. I don't think securing an SBIR phase 2 is the same kind of thing. It's very meaningful to the business. It does add value, arguably, but it really requires that you use that money to create the impact. And so this is where, there's a little bit of a nuance in terms of, is that an impact achievement or not, an impactful achievement or not, or an impact milestone rather than an activity milestone, as you might call it. So this is not a, this is a qualitative sort of assessment that will help you think through what are the things that you really have to achieve if you're going to have a business. Completing the first full product is very impactful. Now you have something you can sell to a lot of people. Securing the first real customer. I don't think that the process of securing your first real customer is an impact achievement. It's something you got to do, but if you're not successful, or if you can't do it in the time allotted, it's not impactful. But that first real customer, that is impactful. That demonstrates somebody wants to use this, and somebody is going to use it without you holding hands, looking over, and they're going to expect your product to function on its own. And then, of course, receiving revenue is super impactful. It's evidence that somebody paid you for something you did. So that is just something to think about as you're thinking about milestones, is what is substitutable and what's not substitutable. Lastly, I want to talk a little bit about resources to help you build your first commercialization plan. As Lisa said in her introduction of me, I'm the director of IALS Venture Development, and we have the Business Innovation Fellow. We're fortunate to have the Business Innovation Fellows as a partnership in collaboration with the Eisenberg School of Management full-time MBA program. We have innovation services that can help you. We work actively with startups from the campus on their first commercialization plan. We can take a small number of startups in for intensive work with fellows teams. We try to magnify our impact with programs like this and with short-term consultations that can help, and we can arrange those on a case-by-case basis. I-Corps at UMass Amherst, my other program, also is there to help you build your first commercialization plan. That's a training program for scientists, engineers to go out and talk to potential customers, to learn about their unmet needs, and to, without talking about technology, to start to understand what kind of product concept would really address their needs, do jobs they need done, create value for these potential customers. Sometimes, often, almost always, those product concepts, those unmet needs are not quite what the inventors or the researchers thought at first. But what they discover through I-Corps is that there is an unmet need out there that they can address if they just maybe perhaps tweak their technology a little or tweak their product concept a little, even though the underlying technology remains the same. So very impactful, and especially because then you've got primary data about what customers need. You're not just reading about it in articles, you're not reading about it in market research reports, you're getting the real primary data on what is needed and what problems they have. Beyond that, there's the National I-Corps team. This I arguably could have put into that Valley of Death, because those are $50,000 awards to go out and do more customer discovery, go out and talk to more potential customers. But I think it's also enabling of first commercialization plans. And it's the perfect example of that is that the statistics show that having done a national I-Corps team, having that data to draw on, having that experience to draw on, increases the success rate of NSF SBIRs substantially, taking them from under 20%, around 15%, to over 50%. So a big increase in the success rate based on the fact that you have primary data about potential customers now. I've also included some just some reading or videos. This SBA SBIR tutorial describes commercialization plans across several agencies that actually, there are 9 or 11 federal agencies that offer SBIRs. This is a review of what each phase 1 program requires. A few of the minor ones are left out, but the big ones are all there. I also want to point out the business reference library collection and the business reference librarian, whom you can contact through this website. The UMass library has a significant collection of business reports, market research reports, databases for startups, databases of organizations that can provide data for you for market size. So that's a great contact in terms of getting information about your potential market. The UMass Amherst Technology Transfer Office, of course, is the go-to office for IP. If you think you have an invention and you're thinking about commercializing it, they're going to want to know about that. You can file an invention disclosure. There will also encourage you to think about a first commercialization plan, or at least a first attempt at market sizing. And we work extensively with them through I-Corps on that. And then finally, this is a pretty detailed document writing a good commercialization plan. It's available through the NIH, and it's a pretty detailed guide to how to write a phase 2 commercialization plan, which goes beyond this sort of starter we've been talking about today. But I wanted to be sure that you had an example of that. And so with that, I'm going to stop sharing and open the floor for questions or discussion. And feel free to put things in the chat, but also feel free to just ask.
I may have missed this on the timeline. Some of them ended in a dot. I got that. And then some were a dot plus an X.
Yeah.
The differentiation there.
So the differentiation there was that. Thank you, Craig. That was a great question. I was worried somebody was going to ask, but I do have an answer.
All right.
So when you're thinking about it, I use that for securing a customer. And the reason I did it that way is that typically securing a first customer, you're actually starting a whole go-to-market process. And that you don't know yet who you're going to secure as your first customer. So it's a more expansive process. But then when you securing a first customer is such an important milestone, it seemed to merit an X. And I can tell you that in startups, when somebody lands that first order, horns are tooting and people are dancing around, and it is exciting.
There's a necessary end of a path, and there's an exciting end of a path, I guess.
There's an exciting end, and also the process is not ending, because you are then going on to secure your second customer. Hopefully you've got a lot of irons, or several irons in the fire, at least at that point, and you're going to get not just one, but more than one.
Karen, that was excellent. Thank you so much. My question relates exactly to that, which is, when does production come in? So there's your first customer and your second customer. When do you actually start thinking about manufacturing and scaling up?
Yeah, that's really so dependent. Thank you, River. That's a great question. It's so dependent on the particular project. So you might, in fact, never manufacture anything. It depends on your product concept. Perhaps you are designing and someone else is manufacturing. Or in the case of a therapeutic, you might not think about manufacturing until you've already, started down the FDA path, regulatory path. And then you realize you have to have a manufacturing plan, but you're first thinking about manufacturing for clinical trials, so small quantities of a therapeutic, but then you have to start thinking about, how do we make this at higher volumes, make exactly what we did. It might be a different process. For software, sort of once the code is written, the idea is it's done. So it's really very dependent on the project and on what you decide. If you decide to license something, again, you may be actually marketing your intellectual property rather than having to do the messy job of production.
Got it. So the solution is kind of up to our particular situation.
It is. An example of something, another example would be, that I'll just throw out there, is that you might be thinking about production, not in the sense of you standing up a factory, but for example, for food projects, there's often a contract manufacturer involved. So there are these businesses that do manufacturing for food ideas, and you might go to them, and that might be your solution. So very often, as you start to think about this, you're thinking, I don't actually want to build a factory. How do I get around that? And that becomes part of your commercialization plan.
Thank you.
Hi, Karen. Thank you for the presentation. My question is, with regards to SBR phase 1, with new products, as well as mass ventures and other things in this valley of death, what is the norms for how far out the commercialization plan would go? In your case, you showed the end being first revenue. Is there something that's representative of a typical scenario for a new product?
Say that last sentence again, sorry.
So in your case, for the example, you ended your commercialization plan with first revenue.
Yes.
Yeah. For a new product, is there a norm that's something that they would see in SBIR all the time, or?
I don't think so. And, I think I like to think of the first product as, it sort of depends on the timeline you're thinking about. That might be the right place to end for if you're, especially for a first commercialization plan, because that first customer then is going to, after that, you're going to start thinking about how do I make more customers and how do I scale? And so you start to think about different things. But I have certainly worked on first commercialization plans where we've done financial modeling, where you then actually take the financial model further and start to think about what how fast can you grow the business. And that's again, that would be something that I just used this example, but no, I don't think you should stop at a first customer necessarily. I think you want to go further than that. For some things like therapeutics, where it might take 10 years to bring it to market, you might not go that far. You might go to when the small company gets a strategic partner. But it's, again, very situational.
Thank you.
Hi, Karen.
Hi, is that Haley?
It is. Thanks for the great presentation. I think that the question I had is, if you have a technology with multiple different applications, is it possible to go through multiple commercialization plans at once? Or is it better to pick the most viable market and stick to that at first?
Yeah, that's a great question, because there are many platform technologies, and that's what we call a technology when there's more than one application. The answer to that is it depends. And usually what it depends on is how much money have you got and how many people do you have? It's better, it's from an investor point of view, from a company point of view, from a success point of view. I think it's better, you're more likely to succeed, in other words, by focusing on one opportunity at a time. But as you start to think about the company, then you start to think about the value of the company as more than just that one opportunity. And so it can be a bit tricky. The other thing is that it's important to think about some, I think, additional applications, because I've seen teams get so they're thinking about one small attainable application, but they may not be thinking about the best first application, which is for those, when we think about what's called diffusion of innovation or technology marketing, we think about the beachhead market. So the beachhead market has some distinct characteristics. And sometimes when you've got a bunch of possible applications, you start to think about which one of these has the beachhead market characteristics. And that's often a really big intractable problem for which people will pay a lot. It's not necessarily the biggest volume, but it's a market that really needs what you've got and will pay a lot for it, and will be forgiving of errors and mistakes and having to work out technical glitches. So it depends.
Thank you.
Anything else? Last call. Okay. Thank you very much, everybody. I really appreciate you coming.
Thank
And
you.
I hope this was helpful.
Very helpful. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah.
Thank you, Karen.
Thanks.
This was great.
Thank you for coming.
Take care.
Thanks. Have a great evening.
Bye.